Hello and welcome to a new episode of Growth Fit interview series by CustomFit.ai. CustomFit, as you know, is a no-code website personalization platform that enables marketers and sales professionals to customize website content within just 3 steps. Download the Chrome plugin, customize your website content, and generate shareable links. Today we have with us Jonny Longden. He's joining us from the United Kingdom. He's a CRO expert and the conversion director at Journey Further, which is a performance marketing agency. He has previously worked in e-commerce, digital experimentation, optimization, analytics, and strategy. Welcome, Jonny. We are so excited that you joined us today.
Thank you very much, and hi.
Okay, so let us start from your journey. Tell us what prompted you to take up marketing and CRO as a career, and what keeps you going?
Yeah, so I've been in marketing of different forms for probably over 20 years now. The first sort of half or quarter of my career really was in the data side of direct marketing, particularly direct mail. So eventually I was involved in things like database propensity modeling and segmentation and things like that relating to CRM. And about, it's probably about 14 years ago now, I just suddenly had a kind of an epiphany that, you know, I was a young guy at the time, and you know, direct mail was probably not something that was going to be too important in the future, and I wanted to therefore switch into more of a digital marketing. So I got a job with a digital agency, and my role there was as a digital analyst, which was a very sort of new thing around at the time, really. And so I was working in that role, but coincidentally, around about that very same time, Google launched Google Website Optimizer, which was really the first commercially, available A/B testing platform. And because of my background in particularly sort of testing direct mail, that was just really interesting to me about how I could bring the learnings from testing direct marketing into testing website content. And so I was kind of instantly hooked. But the same thing still drives me, which is why I found that so fascinating. Is I just love the idea of testing ideas, and I particularly love the idea that it's so easy to get things wrong. I myself, even now, I get completely sort of obsessed with certain ideas, and I completely believe that they're going to work, and then they don't. And that is the reality of experimentation. Day in, day out, the tests that we run on all of our clients, things that everybody thinks are going to work don't, and things that people think are stupid will have a really massive impact. And that whole world just sort of fascinates me. It's that idea that actually the way things really work are not the way we think they work. And it is actually very hard for us to kind of predict or guess what customers are going to do. You just can't do that. So testing is just a really interesting way of doing that. And it's sort of seeing the results is the thing that sort of grips you, and the things that drives anybody who does this sort of stuff.
Right. I'm sure this transition must have been a very interesting one from direct marketing to CRO, focusing on the CRO, full-fledged CRO. So I came across the newsletter on LinkedIn which says "Test Everything." I think that's the title of the newsletter for Journey Further. So yeah. I think that pretty much summarizes most of your work at Journey Further. Am I right?
That's right, yeah. I mean, Journey Further is a performance marketing agency, and our 3 core product pillars are paid media, organic, and PR, and conversion. And I run the conversion division, and so that newsletter is related to the conversion division. But yeah, Test Everything very neatly summarizes my philosophy around the whole thing. CRO, the way it's been practiced by a great many different companies, has very different meanings to different people, and mostly the way people approach it is as a sort of a way of tweaking small things on the website. So you'll find companies that ostensibly do version optimization, but they'll have an IT team or developers or an agency, and you'll usually find that the 90% of what they're working on is stuff that people just think is a good idea. So they'll have a big list of stuff that they're working through, like redesigning the checkout and, you know, creating a new version of the homepage and new content and whatever. And these are all things that people have come up with using their opinion. So they've just decided that needs doing. And then they'll have a small sort of section of stuff that is experimentation. And they might have a CRO person somewhere in the marketing team who's basically running a few small experiments on button colors and things like that. And this kind of misses the point, because really the power of experimentation is that you are simply validating your ideas. You're making sure that what you invest in from a development point of view is actually what you should be developing, and it's going to have commercial benefit. And if you think of it like that, you think, why would you do anything other than that? Why would you do that for small things, and then all the big things you do, you just guess and go, yeah, this seems like a good idea. So really, like our philosophy is very much about experimentation can fuel everything that you do. And if you get it right, you can embed it into your way of working as an organization as a whole. At the end of the day, it's about using research and data to try and figure out what you should do, and experimentation to validate in real situations with real customers whether or not you should do it and how to do it. And can be just a way of life. So that test everything really relates to that. I mean, it's about how you should approach everything from a testing point of view, because you can never really know, you can never guess your customers. People often say, well, I know my customers. Well, no, you don't. You can't. How can you possibly know millions of people? Sometimes, big companies have millions of customers. How can you know millions of people all at the same time? Right. You'd have to be some kind of omnipotent god or whatever, But that's the way people think. They think they intrinsically know their customers. Well, they don't. So the only way you can really understand what's going to work is by testing things.
I truly agree when you say that there are millions of customers, so it's very premature to say that you know how they will, or to predict their behavior while buying, right? So when you conduct these experiments, there must be many hits and misses. So what is your approach towards these successes and failures that you have, and what are your learnings?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic at the moment for me, because the whole of the CRO industry has this sort of very ingrained language of winning and losing, tests win and lose, and that by default, by its nature, has a very sort of positive negative connotation to it. And actually, there is no such thing as winning and losing, because the point of experimentation is to learn. That is fundamentally what you're doing. And if you run a test that fails, that has just as much learning in it as a test that wins, because what you've done is you've demonstrated something about how customers behave and how they're going to react to a certain type of content or not. So the whole point of it is very much about learning, and that's really the most important thing. Like, worst case scenario, when you run an experimentation program, what a lot of people will do is just run a ton of experiments, and they're looking for the ones that win, as they might say, because they feel like that's the sort of commercial benefit. That's the things that's going to make money. And so everything that doesn't win, they just kind of discard and just move on and do something else. But you've really, really missed the point if you do that, because you can learn from absolutely everything you're doing. So Every single test you should always be thinking, regardless of the outcome, what does this tell us? What can we do next? How do we learn from this? How do we do something bigger, something better, something different? How do we change the way we run the business according to what we're learning? So that's the power of it. And I'll always say, that if you ask a scientist what they do, they're never going to say experimentation. They will tell you what they're trying to achieve. And experimentation and the scientific method is something that helps them get towards that goal. And you'll also never hear them talking about winning and losing experiments. The idea that you would, in science, run an experiment and it loses is nonsense. It's all a process of learning and research and development towards some kind of goal, some kind of thing that's trying to be achieved. And it's exactly the same with business experimentation. You should treat it all as a fundamental method for research and development that is helping you achieve some kind of strategic goal.
That was a very insightful approach, I must say. So website optimization is a crucial part of digital marketing, as we know. So what strategy you have towards website optimization in general?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, like the word optimization is it, and we get can get tied in knots with the word optimization. A really good example of the problem with the word optimization is we often talk to clients about starting to run experiments on their website, and they will say, we're going to completely redesign our website in next year or in a year. So there's no point in optimizing the website now. And so they will pull away from the idea of doing any sort of experimentation because they see it as tweaking, optimizing, improving what's there. And just exactly as I've just been saying, the whole conversation we've just been having about learning, that really sort of misses the point. Like really, experimentation is fundamentally about research and development. So the optimization word itself is a bit of a strange one, and we prefer to use the idea of strategic development or content development. However, just back to your actual question, the fundamental way that we approach that and the way we sort of get going is it's very much about the combination of research, data and analysis and experimentation. So it's always important to remember that research and data will never get you a perfect answer, but it certainly gets you closer to the answer than just using your opinion and guesswork. So when you run things like customer surveys or you're observing data through Google Analytics and things like that, you're still interpreting it yourself and trying to decide what to do about it. And that involves your own opinion, which may be flawed. But that's certainly better than just literally kind of guessing. So we're always trying to do that. And the very first thing that we do is approach a website from the point of view of trying to understand the customer behavior from a research and data point of view. So we'll do extensive analysis on Google Analytics data, looking for sensitivities around conversion and where the key areas of the site are that might be problematic. We run what's called Heuristic Analysis, which is really a way of analysing the experience of the website against very structured user experience principles and things like user testing, moderated and unmoderated remote user testing, to really kind of get into the qualitative sense of what people look for. And we'll bring all that data together into a series of key themes, which are really a starting point, because when you start testing things, you will learn that you were wrong about some things. But you have a starting point of a certain key themes, like we might look at a website and run all that research and decide actually your proposition requires work. Like people don't seem to be getting the uniqueness of your proposition and how you explain how you're different to your competitors. might be the key thing that we want to explore, and that might be explored through various different experiments, different pieces of copy, testing, or whatever. But that's the first approach, is that we kind of, we're trying to understand what should we go after first, identify individual experiments that we can run against those themes, and then once we've done that, we can come back and evaluate those themes, evaluate what we've learned, and whether that changes what those themes are. The interesting, I talked about experimentation not being just about tweaking small things, but one of the most important things for us is that we're continually coming back to these big themes and trying to go within them, from the idea of small experiments to big experiments, to even potentially big strategic decisions that a company has to make. So that idea that I talked around proposition, if customers aren't understanding your proposition, you can communicate it better. But what if your proposition needs to be different? So, the first thing might be to test things that just demonstrate that people don't understand your proposition. But then you might start testing actually changing the proposition, which then might lead you to think about actually fundamentally changing the whole business model. And this is where experimentation should lead. It's almost like a kind of a bottom-up strategy development, where small things should ladder up to big strategic questions that help you fundamentally change the way you run your business.
I totally agree when you said that about value proposition. I think one of the biggest challenges in marketing is conveying the right value proposition to the right audience. So, as you said, you do a lot of research around user behavior. So, according to you, when they visit a website, what are a few distractions a visitor faces that stops them from converting on the website?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the objective of the customer and what they're trying to achieve and things like that. I'd say the common things that we come up against, the common things that we find through testing are insufficient product information. So, you're going to buy something, you want to know everything about it. And that's usually, in a lot of cases, companies don't make that extensive enough, or they don't make it clear enough, or they don't pull out the key bits of information. So I think that's one of the fundamental things that we see a lot, is people not really having the information they need to make a decision to purchase. And then also, within that, you could class within that, not just information about the product itself, but information about the service. So how is it going to be delivered? How much is the delivery? That sort of stuff. It's like, how quickly can you get this information in front of people that they're trying to find in order to make a decision and to feel confident about purchasing something. So, and that's sort of a bit of a double-edged sword, because you can go the other way, and there can be too much information, and it can be too difficult to digest and too difficult to get the bits out that you want. So I think understanding exactly what people need to know and surfacing that as quickly and as clearly as possible is one of the most important things. You've then, other sort of points of friction that are quite common are around the actual process of checking out, and actually at the process of actually purchasing something, because you fundamentally get to a point where you're handing over money. And it's at that point where people stop and think, is everything how I think it's going to be? Am I confident in this purchase? And, to get to that point, they will need to go through certain steps. And are those steps fluid? Are they clear? That sort of thing. I think, interestingly, one of the perceptions that I've always had of e-commerce particularly is people like to go through the whole process, the whole shopping process, just to see what happens. So I think when people design websites and when people have their own businesses, it's typical to think that somebody is shopping on this page, they choose a product, and once they've completely decided to buy it, then they will go through the checkout process. And so people can't understand why the drop off is so high through the checkout. But actually, I think people just go right through the checkout process to the point where they get to the payment point just to see what happens. It's a part of researching the product. They just want to see what you're going to show them, and it's how they get absolute confirmation on what the delivery costs and things like that. So they're doing it just to do that. So it's wrong to think of that checkout experience as just a purely functional thing that's helping them to buy. It is in and of itself a part of information, the information that you're showing to somebody about how it works, which is just a subtly different way to think of it. So I think that's where a lot of businesses go astray a bit, is that they try and think too functionally about what people are trying to use the site for, and actually they're using it in different ways.
That completely makes sense. And I think it's very much relevant with respect to the SaaS industry also, where people are also trying to figure out how the service will be delivered, right? It's not just about the product, but they are also concerned about how the services will be delivered over the subscription period.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, we work with several SaaS platforms, and the way that translates in sort of SaaS is, most SaaS platforms have free trials, and their sort of latent belief is that people are taking a free trial because they're ready to use the product and they want to try it risk-free. But actually, I don't think that's the case. I think when you give people a free trial, they will start the free trial just to see what it's like. Exactly. And then they don't necessarily have any intention of using it. You've just given them the option of diving into the product in order to see what it's like. So whereas a lot of SaaS platforms, what they'll do is launch you into onboarding in the sense of this is how you set everything up, when actually people are not, even though they're in the product and they've signed up to the free trial, they're not ready to do that yet. They want to understand, they still want to understand the features and the benefits. So that often gets left out of that onboarding process, where you kind of launched into very functional, this is how you do this is how you set this up. And nobody's telling you why you should and why you should do that there as opposed to using a different product. But they forget to include the benefits and the sort of more emotional side of it.
Right. So I think that that's very effective when it comes to converting the free customers into paid customers. But otherwise, in general, what is your strategy for increasing conversion rate on a website?
Well, yeah. So the strategy is very much the process. Interestingly, we often get asked, by clients, what's your experience of this particular market, or what's your experience of increasing conversion in luxury fashion retail or whatever? And my answer is always the same. It's about the process. It's kind of irrelevant what the product is and the market. What we are actually providing is a process. It's a scientific process, and it's very carefully orchestrated to try and identify ideas from research, run ideas as experiments, measure them very carefully, learn from them, feed that back into the cyclical process. And just like I say, when you start off doing that, the ideas and the results that you're getting might be kind of small things, but if you're continually learning from them, then you're building up to bigger, more interesting things. And so that actually becomes the development strategy. I'll give you a concrete example, which might bring that to life. So we have a client who is a retailer of beds and mattresses, and they sell a combination of products that they have pre-bought and wholesale themselves. So they have their own warehouse and they pre-buy products that they then ship to the customer. And those you can get delivered very, very quickly. You can get 2 to 3 days delivery. But they also sell products where they're kind of drop shipped, and you'll be buying that product and it's ordered on demand from a supplier, and that could take 16 weeks. And what we've learned through lots of different types of testing is that if we limit people's choices to just the products that are in stock, and that can be delivered quickly, that hugely increases the conversion rate. And so, what if we were running CRO in the way that a lot of other people do, we would just go, great, we've done that, let's move on to something else. But if you really think about that, you start to think, should you even sell these other products? What if you didn't? What would happen if you didn't? What would happen to SEO? What would happen to the profitability of the business, because you wouldn't have to maintain these distribution relationships? What potentially would that allow you to do to the brand? Like, you would potentially be able to sort of start to rebrand towards the idea of express delivery being a fundamental part of the brand. So, those experiments that we've run that started off being very small scale experiments, just playing with like different ways of how people filter things and things like that, suddenly sort of leads up to a much bigger strategic question that helps the business, potentially fundamentally pivot the way it works and the way it's set up. So that's really like, to answer your question, our strategy is very much about a process that uses experimentation to learn and to build on those learnings.
Okay. So like you said, your process involves experimentation. So when you come up with these ideas for experimentations, do you have a structure to ideate? Is there a process to come up with these ideas?
Yeah, so in terms of the process generally, we actually have a very rigorous process that is built into a project management system that we have that we've created. And regardless of the system and the software, it's a systematization of a process. And what we're trying to do is to first of all identify and prioritize different types of research and different pieces of work that allow us to come up with ideas. And you could think of all sorts of different things you could look at in terms of trying to understand customers. And there will be tons of ideas that come out of the back of those, but how do you kind of manage all that and prioritize it? So first of all, the starting point is we're trying to understand the strategic direction of the website, and what their sort of goals are. An example of that would be, some businesses, they're very, very much focused on, for example, driving cross-sell, because their business model and their sort of strategy is about acquiring customers at a fairly high cost per acquisition, and then earning profit through nurturing those customers. And so cross-sell and upsell and repeat purchase is an incredibly important part of their strategy. Another business might just be very much about converting the first customer or whatever. So there's things like that about the business strategy that help start to guide what it is that you're focusing on and what it is that you're trying to uncover. And so that's the starting point, and that helps us prioritize the types of research that we're doing. And then from there, we're coming up with ideas, and those might be kind of grouped into particular themes that we're finding out from the research. And initially, you don't know which of those themes have legs, but as you start to run experiments, those themes that you're working to might start to become more interesting, and you can then sort of start to prioritize the themes. Like, another example would be that, a particular client, we might find that we run several experiments that are to do with urgency and scarcity, and they are all very, very successful. And so we therefore know that urgency and scarcity as a theme is something that we need to explode, we need to explore further, and that will give rise to basically work to look at where else on the website can we explore this theme, where else can we take this learning and propagate it. And so that then obviously gives rise to a whole series of experiments, and we're able to prioritize the experiments according to that canon of going from strategy to themes to the learning that we're getting from other experiments. And that's all built into a system that allows us to manage everything. You know, it's very quickly you find with experimentation that there is a lot of information. You end up with tons and tons of ideas, tons of experiments that you have run and that you want to run, and managing it all in one place and being able to easily track what's going on with one particular idea and you know, what's happening with another. And also you end up having multiple people involved in different things. So somebody needs to do some UX design for that, and somebody else needs to do some copywriting for that. So, you know, having a central sort of system and a way of managing all that operationally very effectively is very important.
When you have so many ideas and so many people working over these processes, what is the technical intervention that you required during the process? Is there any tool that you use or any favorite tool for CRO that you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the most fundamentally important bit of technology is A/B testing software. We are tech agnostic, really. Like we don't use a specific tool. A lot of our clients already have A/B testing tools. So we use any and all of them, and I think across our clients we probably use pretty much all of them. I'd say rather than talking about specific tools, it's very important, you know, if somebody is coming up against thinking what A/B testing tool should we use, there are certain quite important things that they need to consider. So A/B testing tools, mostly they will have within them what's called a WYSIWYG editor, which is sort of, you know, like a no-code kind of web content editor. And so the first question is, you know, do you have developers that are going to be able to help you build A/B tests or not? And if not, that no-code editor becomes quite important. They're quite limited in how they work, but they do work. But you know how that works and the quality of it will be more important to you than if you have developers. If you have a developer, they won't use that; they'll just use a code editor. Similarly, you know, how complex is the technology of your website? You know, websites often are built with single-page app frameworks like React. And that presents complexity around the ability to build and run tests. Do you need to think about that? So there are certain sort of questions like that you know, if we're helping customers to understand, if we're helping clients to understand what A/B testing tool they should use, these are the sort of questions that we ask, and we'll kind of you know, help them along that. But in most cases, most sort of businesses with uncomplicated websites should generally start out with Google Optimize, the free version. You won't get hugely far with it because it has very limited, you can only run a certain number of tests. You can only run 5 tests at once. However, just to get started, that is by far the best way to do it because it's free. So yeah, that's A/B testing platforms. You know, there are a whole range of other kind of insight tools that are worth looking at. You know, again, I always advise people to start out cheap or free and build up from there. So Hotjar is one that a lot of people are very familiar with. That can be used free to an extent. And you know, that allows you to run surveys on the site and then ask people questions and watch session recordings and heat maps, all that sort of stuff. So those sorts of insight tools are really, really important as well. And you know, there are really, really good versions of that sort of stuff that you can pay for if you really want to, that offer way, way, way better insight than Hotjar does. But again, you know, start out free. So yeah, it's really a combination of A/B testing tools and insight tools, really. But you know, you can start very basic, and you don't need to invest a huge amount of money in any of this stuff to get going.
So talking about these technical interventions, relying on the technical team can come out as a challenge, especially when working on the website, because everyone who's working on the website is not technically equipped to make any code changes when required. So just want to add this bit about CustomFit here, that CustomFit is a no-code website personalization platform. And we also have a conversion optimization stack. So we solve this problem for marketers, that we enable them to personalize website content and the user journeys to help the visitor take the desired action, engaging them in a better way and increasing the chances of conversion.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, great.
Jonny, being in this CRO field, I think it's very important to be abreast with the latest in the technology. So how do you keep pace with all the latest information pouring in this digital age?
Yeah, a lot of it happens without us really needing to do much about it. We very often, come up against clients who have new technical challenges and things like that. So I think just by the nature of digital technology and web technology, when you're really sort of heavily involved in it with lots of different clients, you can't really avoid coming up against new challenges and new technology challenges and things like that. So we kind of learn about things that clients are doing and thinking about, and end up sort of needing to help them with it, which forces us to get under the skin of those things. But outside of that, I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn generally. LinkedIn is a really good platform for keeping up to date with things like that, and end up kind of learning about a lot of things that other people are doing through that platform and through other sort of social and news platforms and things like that. But yeah, we're in a position where we very, very often get asked questions by a whole range of people, not just our own clients, but other people as well. And very often those questions will force us to go, we'd better go and find out about that. So there'd be brand new things that are sort of just kind of emerging that we then have to go and sort of look into in order to help answer the question. So yeah, it kind of happens organically in a way, really.
Okay, great. So with that, we come to our last question. So what is that one advice you wish you'd got much earlier in your career?
That's a good question. I think in the early days of running experiments on websites, it took me probably longer than I should have done to realize the importance of the statistics in experimentation. And it's a strange area because if you really want to, you can go down a very deep rabbit hole and get into some incredibly complicated maths and statistics, which in and of itself actually kind of puts a lot of people off from really kind of bothering to look into it. But it is really, really fundamentally important. Like when you run a test, that is nothing but a statistical sampling exercise, and so it's a piece of maths. That's what it is. You're trying to kind of infer the probability that your observation is a real observation and would be repeated if you did it another time, and that's statistics. That's what it is. So it is hugely important to understand it. And prior to me being in this industry, kind of 14 years ago, even though I've always worked in analytics and data, I prior to that I would use statisticians for this sort of stuff and have statisticians as advisors, and that doesn't necessarily happen in this industry. You kind of have to understand it yourself. So it took me a while to get my head around all that sort of stuff. And so many other people are in that position. Like so many people who run tests, they have no inclination to really kind of understand statistics. And the unfortunate thing is that most A/B testing tools, the way they tell you whether tests have been successful or not, is actually a load of rubbish. It's not necessarily wrong. It's just that they're not providing all the information that they need to. And really, it's only by people properly understanding it themselves that they can start to see the parameters that they're playing with and understand how to make decisions off the back of it. So yeah, I would have, I would like to have got stuck into that way early. I mean, it's something that's I've been fascinated by for many years now, but early on in my career, I like many other people, didn't necessarily see the importance of it.
Okay. So with that, we come to the end of this session. So thank you, Jonny, for joining us. It was very interesting. And I think the biggest takeaway for me from this interview was when you said that it is wrong to have a negative connotation around the word failure, especially when it comes to CRO or even marketing in general. So I think that
absolutely 100%. Yeah. You have. I was kind of always say if people aren't failing, it's usually because they're pretending they didn't fail.
Exactly.
So and you have a lot of companies that have a real sort of cultural fear of failure. Well, you learn from failure when you learn to ride a bike. The only way you end up riding a bike is by falling off and learning how not to fall off. So,
right.
It's a strange thing that people are so afraid of it. But yeah, failure is a positive thing. It's how you learn. It's how you innovate.
Truly. So thank you, Jonny, for joining us and sharing your insights with us. It was amazing. You have an experience of around 14 years in the CRO industry, so that really enriched our knowledge.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you.